running this ECD for how long, but I'm not necessarily qualified. Do I now need to be qualified? And if so, what do I need to do? So these are the questions that we have been receiving, for example, from practitioners in ECDs in the province. And as a committee, we then decided, please, can we invite higher education? And in this regard, the Department of Basic Education nationally as well, in order to assist us, in order to put some of these concerns to rest, or to at least give some answers to many of our practitioners in the province. I'm going to ask them just to introduce themselves, please, and then just for DDG Sotliknika to introduce her team. And unless you're on the floor, you're allowed to then use your mic and your video. I just please ask that if you're not on the floor, that you just please unmute yourself or maybe put your video off, just so that we assist each other in the online platform. But colleagues, with that, I'm just going to switch my video off, and where necessary, just my mic. Otherwise, you're going to hear a vacuum in the background. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. My name is Dan Plato, member of the committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Christopher Fry, member of this committee.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon,
Welcome.
Chair. Khalid Sayed, member of the committee.
Thank you. Welcome. Anyone else? Member Brinkes, are you online?
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. Member Brinkes here.
Thank you. Welcome. I will now hand over to the DDG just so that she can introduce her team. You may then jump straight into the presentation afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm accompanied this afternoon by Mr. Neil Makaka, who is the Acting Chief Director, Teaching and Learning, by Ms. Michelle. Let me just see. I saw her name earlier on. I don't see it now.
Yes, Ms. Mate. She is online, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
And then Michelle, and they'll introduce themselves, who is our director, and I think well known in the circle. The two colleagues will do the presentation. If you don't mind, colleagues, I am in between two meetings, and I have assigned this role to them. I also noted I have another colleague of mine, DDG Gaza, who's responsible for planning, but she'll also introduce herself. Let me just double check if I've covered everyone. I was expecting Trudy van Wyk, but I can see she's not in the meeting. But over to you, colleagues. Please introduce yourselves.
Sorry, this is Trudy van Wyk speaking. I'm with Belina Moolutsi in one meeting room. So I'm not physically, my name is not on the agenda, on the screen, but I'm with Belina Moolutsi, who's the director for the National Qualifications Framework, and I am the Chief Director for the National Qualifications Framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudy. Thanks for that, because I could not possibly have seen you. Thank you so much. So colleagues, please introduce yourselves, and then we can proceed with presentations. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Michelle Methy, Director of Teacher Education at the Department of Higher Education and Training. Thank you.
Afternoon, colleagues. My name is Neil Makaga, Director, Teaching Qualifications and Policy, also acting as the Chief Director, Teaching, Learning and Research Development.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity for this meeting. My name is Nola Zikasa. As DDG has indicated, I'm DDG Planning, Policy and Strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think the only other person is Ms. Lucas from the Provincial Department. I know that it's not a provincial briefing today, but we welcome Ms. Lucas. Should there be any matters that we need to deal with in terms of liaising between both the national and provincial departments. And I see Mr. Naika has also joined us now, so welcome to them as well. With that, DDG, your team can jump straight into the presentation. We will do questions and answers after that.
Thank you. The presentation will be led by Ms. Mathy. Thank you.
Sorry, DDG, it's Mr. Makhaga who will lead the presentation.
Thanks. Over to you, Mr. Makhaga.
Mr. Makhaga, you must just remember to unmute. We can see the presentation.
It looks as though you might have a previous version of the presentation, Chair.
Is the right one, Michelle?
Okay, you might have added something to the topic. Okay, thanks, Neil.
This is the outline of the presentation, colleagues. The first one will be the importance of ECD, or early childhood education, relevant acts and policies, national qualifications framework, policy on minimum requirement for programs leading to qualification in higher education for ECD, levels and minimum admission requirement for higher education institutions, types of learning in the program design, recognition of prior learning and credit accumulation and transfer, articulation pathways, status of accreditation of new ECD programs. The importance of early childhood education. Early childhood education is vital in early years of learning as it lays the foundation for transfer of foundational skills and competencies for later lifelong learning, and the process of emotional, cognitive, sensory, spiritual, moral, physical, and social and communication development of children from birth to school-going age. Government policies and programs have been developed recognizing the need for and benefit of investing in ECD. Relevant acts and policies. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa is a key document in developing any policy, as is the supreme law of the country. The Higher Education Act of 1997, Act 101 of 1997, the National Qualifications Framework, normally known as the NQF Act of 2008, Act number 67 of 2008, the Higher Education Qualification Sub-Framework of 2013, normally called the HEQSF, and the Policy on Minimum Requirement for Programs leading to Qualification in Higher Education for ECD, which was developed in 2017. This becomes the most important policy that has been developed in the ECD sector or in the ECD subsector, because ever since there was never any policy that has been developed. So in 2017, the department realized that there was a need to professionalize the subsector by having a policy that will have qualifications for ECD educators. Hence, maybe we are sitting here today and try to understand what are these qualifications described in this policy. Where are we coming from up to where we are today? In 1997, we had a white paper on education and training. In 2001, education white paper on ECD. And in 2005, there was the Children's Act, Act 38 of 2005. Then there was a National Early Learning Development Standard of 2009. Then the National Development Plan, also with a vision of 2020, which was then adopted in 2012. The National Curriculum Framework for Children from birth to 4, which most of the things that have been also been taken into the policy on minimum requirement for qualification leading to ECD. Then the National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy of 2015. So we are here now with a policy on minimum requirement for programs leading to qualification in higher education for early childhood development educators of 2017. Just like any other policy, as the policy is more on the qualification, it has to be aligned to the national qualification framework. However, the decision was that we are looking at higher education qualification. So in other words, we'll be looking at the higher education qualification sub-framework. However, we know that there are qualifications that were there before, which more of them were linked to the occupational qualification sub-framework. So this policy that we're talking about now takes into cognizance that there were qualifications that were there before, which were not actually professional qualification as per this policy. So as I go along with the presentation, you will see how all these qualifications, they were aligned to the occupational qualification sub-framework. Some of them were actually accredited by the EDDP CETA, will then articulate into the new qualification framework. So this is where we are. You can see from 1 to 4, it will be more in the schooling, general certificate, elementary certificate, intermediate certificate. I'm looking on the NKF, the middle one, and then I'm looking at this one here. The national certificate 120, normally that's where you get your senior certificate. The higher certificate becomes an introductory pathway into higher education. In your level 6, you'll have the diploma and advanced certificate. Level 7, you'll have your bachelor's 360 credit and the advanced diploma 120 credit. However, if you go to level 8, you will get that bachelor's degree, which is an undergraduate one, but which is level 7 with 480 credit, which is here as part of the professional teaching qualification. That will be your diploma in ECD, in schooling, in TVET, as well as in ECD. Up there at level 8, you've got your honors, your postgraduate diplomas, and then your master's, professional, as well as the academic ones, the level 10, which is the highest level, where you have your doctorate as well as your professional doctorate. That will be the pathway. So I'm not going to look at the occupational ones, but those are the ones that were part of the other dispensation, which were developed through the EDDP CETA, as I've already indicated. I can move here, but if you look at here, you can see that now we are moving, the qualification now for ECD will be aligned to the higher education qualification sub-framework. No longer on this occupational qualification framework. It's part now of the higher education qualifications. That's where maybe there are questions about already qualified people with national certificate, 240 national diplomas, as to where do I move from there? Do I have any pathway in this new policy? This policy, we are also going to say, yes, everybody has got a pathway into this qualification policy. All these qualifications described in this policy include anybody else from schooling, already people with higher certificate, already people working with the national diploma, the 241s, they will be catered in this policy as well. The policy on minimum requirement in ECCE, what does the policy do? Is it follows a nested approach. As I've already indicated, the policy selects suitable qualification types from the HEPSF for ECD educators, starting from the higher certificate. Identifies suitable qualification and as such, identifies purpose of the program leading to a qualification. In other words, you'll be saying it's a higher certificate in ECCE or it's a diploma in ECCE, which is a qualifier there, meaning it will be the early childhood care and education. Describe the knowledge mix that is appropriate for the programs. In an education program, that means you will have the knowledge or the learning in education. You will have the subject knowledge. You will have the pedagogies, general pedagogy. You will have the specialized pedagogy, normally, according to Schumann, what we call a PCK, pedagogical content knowledge. Then you will have your teaching practice or your practical learning. You will also have your fundamental learning and also the situational learning. All these are the learnings or the knowledge that together will make up a program that we say is suitable for an educator in the ECCE. This policy also set minimum credit for programs in terms of knowledge mix, as I've already indicated to say. So there will be 120 credit, for instance, at an outer level, at NQF level. If it's a Bachelor of Education in ECCE, 120 credit will be at NQF level 7. And that will include 60 credit in education and another 60 credit on specialization. It also provides the NQF level for each qualification type described in the policy, as I've indicated before. Higher certificate is NQF level 5. Diploma or advanced certificate, NQF level 6. So that's how this policy, we say, it follows a nested approach. It starts there in smaller, going bigger and bigger as it goes out and out up to the master's level. How are these qualifications in the policy going to be approved? We say programs leading to a specific professional qualification for ECD educators must be designed in accordance with the minimum requirement for the qualification as set out in this policy document, in the policy. Learning programs must also comply with all the accreditation criteria and requirements of the Higher Education Qualification Committee of the CHE. In other words, what happens? A university or a private higher institution will develop a program. The program will be submitted to the Department of Higher Education and Training. In the Department of Higher Education, we've got 2 committees. The first committee is what we call a Teacher Education Program Evaluation Committee. That committee comprises of officials from the Department of Basic Education, the Department of Higher Education and Training, EDTT CETA, as well as SAINS. That will be the first level of quality assurance of a program. The university then will, after getting our approval letter from the TPEC committee, it will then submit to the PQM, Program Qualification Mix Committee, where this is the committee that will then determine if the program is really trying to address the national issues, or if including provincial issues, as wherever the institution is trying to address whatever needs is required to do as per their mission and vision. So they will develop that program, and then the department will then give the clearance of the program. That clearance also for a university means the program will also be funded. Upon getting clearance from the department, that is when the program will be submitted to the Council on Higher Education for accreditation. So that is how, in terms of quality assurance, a program from the university will go through before it gets into accreditation. For privates, it's a different game because the private do not get, they don't have to submit for PQM. They will submit to TPEC for approval, where the DDG will sign off an approval letter. Upon receiving an approval letter, a private higher education institution will then submit to Council on Higher Education so that they can get accreditation. So that's what I've already said in the second paragraph. The third one then will say, new professional ECD educator program offered by higher education must also comply, as I've already indicated. Ultimately, upon this, why do we do all this quality assurance? It's also to make sure that SAIS as a professional body will be able to register graduates from these programs. Because if these programs have never been accredited, approved by the department, then we have a problem when it comes to registration of the graduates. At the end, then it comes back to say, I've graduated, but says that does not want to register me as an educator of the ECD subsector. So that's how we do all this. Principle underpinning the policy and its implementation, we're saying the policy embraces the concept of lifelong learning, recognizing that learning takes place through the person's life. Recognizing that specific holistic nature of learning, which includes cognitive, emotional, and cultural aspect of learning. It promotes the values that underpin an open and democratic society and fostering the culture that promotes human rights and children's rights. Pursuing excellence and promoting the full realization of every child, tolerance of ideas and appreciation of diversity. Promote optimal opportunities for cultural responsive pedagogies that are transformative in nature and inclusive. Recognize the quality of learning, early learning and development as a way of ensuring the optimal development of babies, toddlers, and young children, and laying a foundation for lifelong success in education. Finally, recognizing that babies, toddlers, and young children are competent people whose learning and development are important. I think this is self-explanatory. I don't need to go and explain every bullet. Who are the end users of the policy? Higher education institutions to develop programs for ECD educators. DHET determines whether proposed programs submitted by universities conform to the policy. DHET evaluates the program for approval for funding and inclusion in the PQM. I've already indicated this. DHET also evaluates programs submitted by private higher education institutions. CHE of the HEQC will then accredit and quality assurance assure the program. So in other words, the CHE becomes the final. But what is also, which I did not include, is that upon accreditation, SAQA will then register the program on the NQF. The last one there is that before the last one, we say the professional bodies in this instance, the SAIS will also will register the graduates. And then the employers hopefully will employ graduates who have completed qualification described in this policy. What are the types of learning? I've already spoken about them a bit. The first one will be disciplinary or subject matter knowledge, which can be presented in two components within the curriculum. In other words, it will be the first part will be the study of education and its foundation. The second part will be the specialized subject matter, like a subject, mathematics or early numeracy because it's ECD, or literacy. Secondly, you have a pedagogical learning, which incorporates general pedagogical learning, which refers to the study of principle, practice, and method of teaching. Pedagogical learning includes knowledge of learners, learning curriculum, general instructional, and assessment strategies. So in other words, in the general pedagogy, that's where you will see is the issue of classroom management. Those will become some of the things that you need to understand. How do you manage a classroom? How do you teach? How do you pace your teaching? A play-based type of pedagogy. Those would be some of the general pedagogical learning that we're talking about. PCK, that would include concepts, teaching methods, rules of specific discipline in order to evaluate their progress. That will be using group work, how do you prepare your lesson, and all those issues related to teaching in a classroom. Finally, inclusive education forms an important aspect for both general pedagogical knowledge and the PCK. Because learners, there will be those that are slow learners, the one in the middle, and the ones that are very, very good. How do you also look at that in an inclusive situation in a classroom? So that is how this is the first and second part of the learning that must be included in the program. In other words, as a department, we'll be saying, are these aspects, the first two aspects, are they included in the program? Thirdly, practical learning.
I just want to check, Mr. Magaga. I'm not sure if I'm the only person who
Okay,
lost
sorry.
your sound there for a little bit. Okay, I can hear you now. Thank you.
I'm not sure. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you
Yes,
now.
Neil.
Thank you.
Do I have to go back?
You may
or
continue.
Can I go back or I'm fine where I am now?
You can continue where you are.
Okay. So the third type of learning is practical learning, which involves learning from and in practice. From practice, I was saying it can be learning from case studies, video recordings, lesson observations. They can work somebody who's an expert teaching in order to learn from practice and also develop their own understanding. Then the second part of the learning in practice, which involves teaching in authentic and simulated classroom environment. So that's where they go to these ECD centers. The student needs to go to the ECD centers, but it must be clearly indicated in the program so that it can then be approved and moved to all those different levels that I've already indicated. So in terms of that learning practice, when they go to school, obviously they may, or rather the school ECD center, they may start with observation and reflect on the lesson taught by others. Therefore, they will be learning in practice. They can also start preparing their own lesson, start teaching and presenting by themselves in that situation. So in other words, that's what we will look at. Practical learning, as I've already indicated, is an important condition for the development of tacit knowledge, also known as experiential knowledge, which is an essential component of learning to teach. So without practical learning, we cannot approve a program because we need somebody to go out there. First, they can do it what we used to call micro-teaching in the lecture halls to understand what they need to go and look when they go to those ECD centers. Learning through play, how are they going to deal with all these things? How are they going to teach these soldiers and babies? The fourth one is fundamental learning. Normally, we can say it's functional literacies. This is about learning to communicate at a basic level in a second official language that must be one of the official African languages or South African Sign Languages. Why do we have this? We are saying, as the South Africans, we've got 11 official languages. If you're going to only know, for instance, English, and you happen to be placed in a ECD center where they only speak isiXhosa, how are you going to communicate with those learners? So we are saying any program that is being developed, whether it's for schooling, whether it's for ECD or any other, they need to have fundamental learning so that they are able to communicate in a second official language, especially in African language. Why so? Because every learner in South Africa will have done either English or Afrikaans or both until matric. So when they move to higher education, they still have to also know an African language. They must also be able to use ICT. These days is better, but in this sector as well, you must know that we still have older people who have done this thing somewhere in 2000 or before even 2000, who may not understand how to even switch a computer. So therefore, we're saying the programs that are going to be approved and accredited should also have elements of ICT. so that every educator that go out there to teach in an ECD setting must also understand how to operate a computer. So that is what we call fundamental learning. At a basic level, we're not saying they must become experts, but just to operate, able to communicate, able to present, able to type, what we call end-user computing. The last one is educational learning, which is the study of education and its foundation. We are saying to be able to teach learners, you must understand the psychology, the philosophy, the sociology, and also where we are coming from in education as a country, the history of education. That forms the basis for educational learning. And in other words, a program should include these foundations of education, including politics and economics. Then we talk about professional ethics and issues related to knowledge of and relation between self and others in the life and work of an ECD educators are cross-cutting themes that are theoretically located within the study of education and its foundation. Maybe what I did not even explain is that all students getting into these programs, when they are being offered by institutions, they will be screened in accordance to the Children's Act, whether they do not have any, they've never been charged with anything regarding violation of children's rights or any transgression around the children. The last one is situational learning. Situational learning refers to the knowledge of the varied learning situation, context, and environment of education, as well as all prevailing policies, political, organizational context relevant in and to ECD context, such as HIV, poverty, malnutrition, diversity, inclusivity. The question is, when we know where we come from, if you go to some places, you will find that there's abject poverty. So if you are there as an educator, how are you going to deal with that? So that's why the program should also include situational learning, so that the educators understand the context where they are working. I mean, say you go to an institution or in an ECD center, 2 or 3 kids, their parents or someone of the relative passed on because of HIV/AIDS, and you are busy saying maybe HIV/AIDS people are doing this because they are careless and all this. Some of them are a bit older, they are 4 or 5 years. They go home, they tell their brothers, their mothers, whoever the relative that our teacher was saying people who die of HIV/AIDS because they are very useless or they are careless. So they need to understand this when they go there. How do they interact with the learners? In schooling context, we know there is SACE. They've got those values and also code of conduct in their books, which everybody who's registered with them needs to follow all those regulations that are stipulated there. So, but that must start where? At a university or at a higher education institution. They cannot start learning it when they start working. They must start learning it when they are still busy with the program. So hence we say the program should include these issues so that it can be approved. If this type of learning is not there, therefore we are going to notify the institution to say this is also required so that the program can be approved and that the graduates are able to understand how they are going to interact with the learners. Then the recognition of prior learning and credit accumulation and transfer. One of the issues here we're saying when we do RPL and credit accumulation and transfer, normally we say RPL for recognition of prior learning, and credit accumulation and transfer we say CAT. We say learning outcomes should not be compromised, and it should take place on an individual student by student basis. It must not be that we've got 30 students, therefore everybody, because they've got a higher certificate and another diploma, all of you are just giving you 120 credits, even though some do not even deserve any credit. If it's CAT, it must be on an individual student. Look at the situation. What did that student do? Yes, he was working at a ECD center. What does this one has? This one has got a 240 credit diploma, but this other one has got a higher certificate in ECD. Then, in other words, when it comes to credit accumulation and transfer, the two will differ. The other one has done 240 credit, the other one has done 120 credit. So in other words, that's why we say it must be student by student basis. It must not be a blanket RPL. I know people call us here and say, I've done this, I've got a 240 credit diploma, I want to upgrade. Must I do only 120 credit because 240 plus 120 is 360. Therefore, I must get a qualification. It does not work that way. The policy from the Council on Education on RPN and as CAT says otherwise. You will see at the bottom there. And it must involve assessment. It must not just be that you've got this, then it's fine. For CAT, it's even worse. Many institutions will say, higher education institutions will say, we map. You've got this qualification, let's map the modules that we have done with the qualification that we're offering. And also it must be noted, RPL and CAT is not done by the Department of Higher Education and Training, because people call us, they drop us email, thinking that the Department of Higher Education and Training is the one that must perform RPL or CAT. No, it is done at institutional level, not by the department. So that is what we need to actually tell our people in the community, especially honorable members from the Parliament of the Western Cape, that when they give you information, then they ask you questions. The information is that it's not the Department of Higher Education and Training that must do this, but it must be done at an institutional level. So that is the admitting institution, in other words. So this, you can say, it can be found in the SAPA document of 2013, National Policy for Implementation of the Recognition of Prior Learning, and the second one, which is the Council on Higher Education, Recognition of Prior Learning and Credit Accumulation and Transfer Assessment Policy of 2016. These are the two documents that we need to also look at. But what does it say there? It says a partially completed qualification. Say, for instance, our study, then maybe due to finance or due to my own personal reasons, I could not complete a qualification. I was doing a 3-year or a 3-year diploma. I only did half of it. After assessment, there's a possibility that all credit that I have completed for a partially completed qualification, they can be moved into another qualifications. For instance, we're talking about qualifications from the QCTO or EDTP CETA. Somebody did not complete that diploma, 240 credit. They have done only 180 credit. All 180 credit can be moved to the 360 diploma in ECCE. But for all completed qualifications, for instance, the diploma, 240 diploma from EDTP CETA, we can then say half of 240 is 120. All 120 credit, there's a possibility that it can be transferred to the diploma in ECC, the new qualification, which is going to professionalize that subsector so that the person becomes professionally qualified as an ECD educator, not as a practitioner. But we're saying you are moving from being a practitioner, you are becoming a professionally qualified educator. That is what this policy does. It professionalizes all individuals that want to work in that sector. One of the things that we are saying is that sometimes a person can say, they don't want, they said they've approved my RPL, but they cannot admit me this year. It is because only 10% of students can be admitted at a particular year through RPL. What does it say? If, for instance, the institution can only take 50 students, what does it mean? It means only 5 can be admitted through RPL in that institution. if they're taking only 50 students. And you may find that there are 20 or 30. This is a CHE requirement. It's not our requirement. It was not done by us. Don't say the department is saying. It's the Council on Higher Education is saying only 10% of annual course can be RPL'd and be admitted in a particular year at an institution. Not everybody. So let also that we understand that not everybody can be moved into the program through RPL. Articulation pathways, just I'll quickly go through. Level 5, like I've already indicated, is higher certificate. Most of them will have higher certificate. Those with higher certificate will then be moved. They can be admitted to become professionally qualified through what? A diploma in ECCE. Or some with a higher certificate can move straight to the Bachelor of Education in ECCE. So they will decide, student will decide. This one is a 3-year one. This one is a 4-year one. So with the higher certificate, if it's being used for access, then no credit can be transferred to the diploma. But if a person already has a senior certificate with a diploma entrance, but has already completed a higher certificate, then he can then submit the higher certificate for assessment of prior learning for advanced credit standing. So all students, remember, there are students who did not pass their matric or their senior certificate well. So in order to access the higher diploma, they have to complete a higher certificate. So that certificate is being used for access. Let that be clear. But if I've got my senior certificate with a diploma entrance, but I also studied a higher certificate in ECD, that certificate will be used, we can do credit accumulation and transfer, or it can be, if he was already working, they can also be RPL, and then the person will then get advanced credit standing. In other words, he's not going to do the whole 360 credits on the diploma or the whole 480 credits on the Bachelor of Education in ECCE. So this is the way of how you access. At level 4 here, which I would not put because we're talking about higher education, will be senior certificate. But the senior certificate, as we are all aware, some have got higher certificate entrance, others diploma, others bachelors. So those with a bachelor's, they can do this qualification, Bachelor of Education, or they can do the diploma in education. But those who did not pass well, they had a higher certificate entrance and completed the higher certificate, then they will have to do a diploma as an access qualification without getting any advanced credit standing. Maybe let me stop there before I confuse you a lot. So this policy, we are saying, it forms we've already said it forms the basis for developing qualification, and the qualification from this policy cannot be used for schooling sector. If a person wants to move into schooling with this qualification, can then do what we have already talked about, credit accumulation and transfer, or RPL. And we've already said that the policy embraces a spirit of openness, inclusivity, and seeks to enable articulation and access rather than constraint and exclusion as part of the principle. So that if you've passed something from this ECD, you want to move to teaching in a school, there is that possibility which can be done through CAT. Remember, it's a possibility. It's not given that when you do RPL or CAT, it's given that you're going to get advanced credit standing. You may not get it. There are two examples that we've given. The first example is a higher certificate in ECC 120 credit NQF level 5. We say the purpose is an entry or access qualification to the study of ECD education in higher education training context will qualify graduate as educators. Minimum admission requirement, a senior certificate or a level 4 certificate vocational or an appropriate level 4 certificate in ECD. Upon completion, you progress to the diploma as I've already indicated. So I'm not going to, maybe what I did not talk about is we are saying it also include work integrated learning, part of WIL, minimum of 6 weeks during teaching practice. And the student must be cleared in terms of Students Act 38 of 2005, because we don't want people who can go there who are perverts, sorry to use that word, and end up abusing the kids. And they must be proficient in the use of at least one official South African language as a language of learning and teaching, commonly known as LOLT, language of learning and teaching. Must be partially proficient in basic conversation. Normally we call it language of conversation competence in at least one other South African language that we have said. Actually, it's supposed to be an African language, but however, we are also saying if a person is doing English and isiXhosa, given an example maybe in the Western Cape, can also do basic conversation in Afrikaans. Come on. All must have conventional competence in African Sign Language or a sign language. In other words, they must also be able to do a sign language if they cannot do any other language, depending what the person is competent to do as a language of conversational competence, as I've already indicated. Then the diploma, I think Michelle there, supposed to say 360 there. Typo there, Michelle, supposed to be 360 credit. This is an initial professional qualification. In other words, this one will become fully professionally qualified with a diploma in ECC. It's supposed to be 360 credit there. There was a typo. The NQF level is fine, 360 credits. Minimum admission requirements is a national senior certificate or a level 4 NCV with a diploma entrance endorsement or any other level 4 occupational or ECD qualification. If a person already have a level 5, already indicated there, a level 5 certificate or diploma can be considered for admission and assessment of prior learning for advanced credit standing. Upon completion of the diploma in ECC, you can then move to the advanced diploma in ECC or a B.Ed. So this has got what we say, there is an in-depth specialization of knowledge, practical skills and experience, professionally competent educators, and the will is between 18 and 24 weeks. Institutions decide whether they want to do the minimum or the maximum or in between 18 and 24 for this program. The Bachelor of Education, this is another initial qualification. The admission requirements still the same, national senior certificate, but this one with the endorsement for a bachelor's entrance, or any equivalent level 4 or 5 vocational occupational qualification, including a certificate or diploma in ECD or EduCare. The EduCare one would be the ones from the TVET colleges. They can move into this. Transfer of credit into the B.Ed is also possible. Upon completion, these people can progress to the advanced diploma or a Bachelor of Education honors or a cognate postgraduate diploma in ECCE. What does this qualification does? Develop cognitively with diploma for easy articulation from the diploma to the B.Ed. We are saying institution must develop a diploma together with the bachelor so that there can be easy articulation for those who want to progress into the bachelor's, because there are some people who say, I'm not going to die without having a degree. So therefore, the person can have a diploma, 360, and then they say, I want to move to a Bachelor of Education. So there is that articulation that is there. And then it develops a well-rounded educator, supposed to be educator, with a required disciplinary knowledge, educational theory, and teaching methodology. The will here now goes up because this one is a 4-year qualification. It's between 20 and 32 weeks. It's either they take the minimum of 20 or the maximum of 32. The list here is for the institutions that have already submitted. Some of them have got full accreditation and they've been registered on the NQF. CPUT They are developing, but not yet gone through the PQM clearance, and there's also nothing there. University of the Free State, they have the PQM. They are waiting. They need to get accreditation so that the qualification can be accredited, and then they can start offering. University of Fort Hare, they've developed a diploma as well in ECCE. This one has gone through the PQM. It has been approved by us, gone to PQM, has been approved or cleared. They still have to get accreditation, registered on the NQF. UKZN, no, it must have been approved by the TPEC, but not yet have the clearance from the PQM. But the one, I'm colorblind, I don't know what color I can call this, but all this one in this color, Northwest University, Bachelor of Education in ECC, everything has been approved. They are going to offer it next year. And this one, I think, is good because they also, I think they're also going to offer it on distance, if I'm not wrong. University of Pretoria, they also got a Bachelor of Education in ECCE. Everything's right, but they're offering in 2025. Wits University, they've got also a Bachelor of Education in ECCE. All is well, everything has been done. They've got accreditation, they're registered on the NQF. They'll be offering next year, 2024. UNISA, they've got regional offices across the country, which can be a huge bonus for anybody who wants to enter into this subsector. They've got a diploma in ECCE, PQM clearance, accredited, registered on the NQF, will be offered next year. Water Sulu University, they've got a diploma in ECCE, got a PQM clearance, not yet accredited, not yet registered on the SAQA NPF by SAQA. We don't know when they will start offering it. University of the Western Cape, I think this one, it got approval from us this year. They have not yet submitted the PQM in the department. After PQM, maybe they will submit to the CHE, then SAQA, and then maybe they will offer maybe 3 years from now, hopefully, but I don't know. So thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much. I just want to check, Ms. Matei, do you have anything that you would like to add before I just open up for questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much to my acting Chief Director for the presentation on the policies. I'm going to take it 1 or 2 or 3 levels down to what I call grassroots level, and my experiences with, for example, the South African Congress for ECD and a range of meetings that they've held in the Gauteng province for practitioners, childminders, etc., who are working in the field of ECD. So I like to say that our policies everywhere, I guess, can be likened to what Emile Durkheim called sacred, in terms of, for example, they're untouchable, they're there, we look to them for guidance, etc. And I want to say that we need to move from that sacred space of policy now to the profane level, which is, well, now that we're actually implementing or developing or designing things, what exactly is happening in the sector? What are the problems and the challenges that impede the successful development of qualifications and also the offerings to the relevant people who might want to take them up? And so if you will allow me, Chair, just to kind of pontificate for a few minutes, I have a few things that that one could add to this discussion. The first one is in relation to the confusion in the sector, and not those who are academics who know the policy very well, but for the people that this is going to be a godsend to, hopefully, in terms of professionalization. So the policy is named for ECD educators, But the whole concept of early childhood development has evolved so much over the last 10, 15, even 20 years. In the past, ECD was anything from 0 to 7 years, and sometimes up to 9 years. But we also know that in the schooling sector, we have a program called the Bachelor of Education in the foundation phase, which covers children from grade R up to grade 3. And there's been a lot of talk around, well, does this ECD qualification allow ECD practitioners to teach in grade R and grade 1, and it doesn't. So that was the first area of confusion that the colleagues that I met with over the last year and a half or so have been told by often fraudulent service providers that if they undertake a 6-month ECD qualification, they will then be registered as professional educators and can teach in the foundation phase. So that's the first one. What we are talking about in our policy is not 0 to 7 years or 0 to 9 years. We're speaking about birth to 4 years. And that's the section, that's the area, that's the sector which precedes the formal schooling space. So this is specifically 0 to 4 years. And people are not sure about this new terminology, especially since it's in a policy that relates to qualifications for early childhood development educators. So that's one area that we've been trying to help the people at grassroots level to understand. And I can tell you it's heartbreaking to be faced by practitioners, childminders, etc., who have been fooled into spending their money on these fly-by-night programs, I would like to call them. So let's get that one out of the way. Then the next thing is the incentives. Once we've explained that to the practitioners and we say, well, you need to get into level 5, which is the higher certificate if you want to become professional. So the concerns that they raised are, first of all, well, I don't have a level 4, and how can I get that? And the second one is that if I spend my money, and I think it's 89% of our practitioners in the country earn less than 3,500 rand per month, many much lower. So who pays for them to undertake these qualifications? The higher certificate at universities. And once they have done the higher certificates, how can they proceed further without having to spend all those additional years? And Neil had explained about credit accumulation transfer and also RPLing. But most importantly is the fact that whoever is offering this level 4 qualification, and it's not a university, it could be a TVET college, it could be, I believe some NGOs are now offering that level 4 qualification, but they need to work in tandem with the university that is offering the higher certificate, because in order for the practitioners to move seamlessly into the level 5, it makes sense that what they're doing in level 4, we call it cognates in some ways, but in other words, there's some equivalence across the two. But more importantly, from the higher certificate to the next level, that higher certificate then, if it was developed by a university and they're taking in all the practitioners, they can then allow for more cognate or more equivalence in terms of the knowledge between the higher certificate and the diploma, and so reduce the number of years. The third problem that the practitioners have is that will they be employed? But that is a DBE matter. And I must say that our DBE colleagues have been working extremely hard, very committed, very passionate since they took over the space. I think, was it April 2022 or 2023? Now the years are just passing by so quickly. And so they have a whole range of committees that sit, and we're very privileged to sit on some of those. And they are working out a human resource development framework, etc. So we're hoping that that will also be addressed. But now let's see, what is the need then for this? Is there a need for it? Our universities, I think, are concerned that they might not have enough of a demand for the qualifications. And then secondly, we have only supported 10 universities to offer from, I think 2 are going to eventually offer the highest certificate, but then the rest will be looking at the diploma and the bachelor. And yet some of the data that I've looked at in the there's a report by the ETDP seated chair for early childhood development in terms of labor markets and implications for skills development and skills planning. And they give quite a bit of detail around the demand. Now, say, for example, for the universities, they would need to know this. We need to diffuse this down to university level. So say, for example, in the Western Cape, this report says you have 500, if I'm reading it correctly now, I can't remember when last I looked at it, but I think it was the number of children between 0 to 4 years attending daycare centres in the Western Cape is 221,000. 334,000 are not attending. And please forgive me, colleagues, if my data is not up to date. This comes from that report I was talking about. So over 555,000 children between, let's say, from birth to 4 years. Of those, less than half are attending centres. Where are the other 334 that are not attending? So I'd like to think that once those are attending, children are attending centres, that there will be more clarity on how many practitioners are actually needing to upskill into the higher certificate. And I would imagine that that would probably be, I think there was a 49% of practitioners that would require the higher certificates. And I don't even know how many would require NQF level 4 or lower. So just to sum up then, universities need to start developing the higher certificate, but of course, everybody's cautious because it takes 2 to 3 years to develop a program. And then you don't know if you're going to be getting the number of students who will make this, of course, viable for the universities to undertake. And we're sitting with just one who is developing the higher certificates as a 2 or 1 university of the 10 supported by the EU through a project that the DHET is actually implementing. It's closing out now. It's extremely difficult for these universities to get these programs through our committee. Neil mentioned the TPEC committee. And that's because the colleagues who are trying to pull together the program are not they're still working off legacy ECD programs and not looking at all the documentation that the DBE has put out, the NELDAs, the National Integrated Curriculum Framework, and etc. So it is a learning curve for them as well. Essentially then, I think that covers, although I'm sure there are a couple of things I've forgotten, that might cover some of the concerns that I've experienced when I've been speaking to practitioners and childcare minders, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Matei. I am going to open up the floor for questions now. But before I just open up the floor, from both the national side and the provincial side, after the question session, I am going to ask whether there are any ideas national and province wish the other to consider in the space, and or whether there are matters you wish for the other sphere to tend to. The reason I'm mentioning that is because you have this opportunity where we are all essentially, for lack of better phrase, in the same WhatsApp group today. So please have a think about that while I take the questions from the members. Members, the floor is open. If I could see hands. If there are no hands, I think I have like 4 questions. Okay, colleagues, I will then start with my questions in the absence of hands, and then if hands pop up later, I will take another round then. Okay. Firstly, I just wanted to check on one of these slides, Mr. Magaga, you mentioned that only maximum 50% credits for your complete qualification would be transferred. And I just wanted to check in terms of, and I know that these get checked by the respective institution, as you said, and not the Department of Higher Education. But given the national policies that says, okay, this is how implementation works, what if you have done everything the same? Would it not be then possible to move more than 50 credits? Is there a reason why it's only maximum 50 credits? It seems a little bit arbitrary in comparison, because you did also mention that it is assessed on student-to-student basis. And on that premise, I would think that perhaps if someone had 60% of credits, for example, that they could move, that it would save that person a lot of money if they've already done something. Then, secondly, it's not necessarily a question, but perhaps just a comment. Ms. Matei mentioned the amount of children who are possibly attending centres in the Western Cape and not attending. And one of the observations members of the committee have made on our provincial oversight visits to ECDs have been that many parents actually don't want to send their children to ECD because they consider or they view it as an after-school program instead of an education program in order for a child to become school ready. So I think it may become necessary, or there may be scope for the committee to engage national DBE in terms of how we're going to get parents as well to engage with the concept of ECD as an educational program, and not just I'm dropping off my child because I don't have anyone else to look after them. And then finally, you mentioned that universities are currently, or higher education institutions, including TVETs, are cautious regarding developing programs. Is it not possible to perhaps in its initial phase to subsidize part of the program? Perhaps that could be per student, or if you know that there are certain sunk costs that would go into the creation of a program anyway, that perhaps some of that could be considered. And just finally, okay, now I'm gonna stick to those, and I'll do the rest later. I think those are quite 3 big ones. Thank you. Ms. Magaga, you can start if you wish, and then you can always allocate to others where relevant. Thanks.
Okay, Chairperson. I think according to the CHE on their policy on RPL and credit accumulation and transfer, they state that a qualification cannot be solely awarded on the basis of RPL. So there is this issue of the 50% rule, meaning you can only go up to 50%. The other 50% you should have studied in that institution. So ultimately, if you've completed a qualification, you cannot go beyond that. Unlike when you've got a partially completed qualification or incomplete qualification. if they map the credit with the qualification that you are going to register for. All credit, they can be, say for instance, it's a 360 credit, you have done 200 credits. If it maps well, because it's partially completed, they can take all the credit to a new qualification that you are registering. So that is the difference. The difference is that a qualification cannot be awarded on the basis of RPL. So you have to also study the new information that is there for this new qualification. Remember, you have done 240 credit for the diploma in ECD. However, most of the stuff that we've already spoken about here, the issue of situational learning, the issue of education in its foundation, all those kind of things, knowing the rules and regulation of SACE and all this, you may not have done all those things. So therefore, we can look at whatever you've done up to 50%, but other new learning needs to have been done in that institution that you are registering for the new program. But I think there can be other better explanation by colleagues as well.
Thank you so much. Ms. Matei? Or if there's someone else who wishes to take the rest of the questions.
So is the question in relation to the one you asked of me, Chair? The way forward?
No, the 50%.
Yes, please.
Oh, the 50%. No, Neil has answered on the 50%.
No, yes, Mr. Makaga has answered on the 50%. Mine was regarding the development of the programs to yourself.
Yes. Okay, so I do think that we can really brainstorm how we can get through this obstacle of universities offering and practitioners taking up the offer. I think that the idea of subsidizing or supporting might be something really viable, and you could probably speak to the DBE about it. The ETDP CETA in the Western Cape is really helpful. I've just come from a meeting with the Provincial Department of Education last week, and they've received so much help and so much funding from the ETDP CETA. So certainly you could collaborate amongst the stakeholders within the province. The universities are UWC at the moment, who's developing, and also CPUT. I'm not sure which NGOs are based in the Western Cape who might also be working on that space. I really believe that collaboration is the key in the province and in other provinces for us to address this. I mean, the report by the chair says that there's going to be a looming crisis very soon, and to develop these programs is going to take quite some time, 2 to 3 years, as I said. We might be able to find ways of fast tracking it, but I do believe that TVET colleges must work with the universities in the Western Cape to see how they can develop the level 4 TVET, which will move easily into the level 5 at the university and then move upwards. I have been in discussion with the Dean of the Faculty of Education at UWC. They have just an informal discussion around the creation of a Centre of Excellence for Early Childhood Care and Education from birth to 4 years. They already have the physical structure at the university, but and so Professor Govender was quite keen to see how he might be able to move into that space in the Western Cape. But of course, that would just be based at a university, and centres would be able to come there. There would be programs offered there, etc., for the practitioners. So just to quickly sum up, Chair, I know I can rant on and on. So yes, certainly collaborative stakeholder engagement in the province is really urgent. It could take the space of a Bosberaad or Ndaba, whatever the case is that you might want to call it in the Western Cape, but people need to come together They need to see what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and how they can get to the point that you would want the Western Cape to be in. We need to have a very good situational analysis of the situation, the landscape in the Western Cape. I do believe that there needs to be a very strong advocacy and communication amongst the centres, registered and unregistered, so that the practitioners and childminders, etc., will know what it is out there that could lead to them being professionalised. And I do believe that perhaps the cherry on the top would be creating the first centre of excellence for early childhood care and education in the Western Cape, using one of your universities and a couple of your TVET colleges. And we would be very keen to get involved in this as one of your partners in this particular sector. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Ms. Mulatsi's hand as well.
Thank you, Chairperson, and it's Ms. van Wyk that's sitting with Ms. Mulatsi. I just want to refer back to the 50% clause. I think what's very important, this is a policy not made by the department, but it's made by the Quality Council for Higher Education, the Council for Higher Education, as Neil has said earlier. And that means that no qualification, it's not only for RPL, but it's all qualifications, that you cannot transfer a full qualification to another institution or another qualification. That is where the 50% rule comes in. But what is important at the moment, the CHE is busy with a review of their policies, and in specific, the RPL policy and this 50% clause and 10% clause that a lot of people, including some in the department, has not issues on, but has commented on that. So what I will suggest is, as the committee, is that we can also look at the CATS policy specific, the credit accumulation and transfer policy of the CHE, and comment on that to the CHE, so that we get the voice into that new development, where they are looking at the moment at the revising the HEQSF, the Higher Education Quality Sub-Framework. So I think it's an opportune time also to comment on that 50%. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'm going to ask again for hands, and if there are none, then I'm going to get back to my original question to the national and provincial department. Going once, going twice. Okay. Mr. Naika or Ms. Lucas, I'm going to start with you. Not sure if you're online with us or if we are a radio in your background.
I'm here, Chairperson, and Ms. Lucas is here as well.
Okay, no problem. So we are not a radio in the background, don't worry. Mr. Naika or Ms. Lucas, is there a particular idea or matter that you wish the National Department of Higher Education and Training to consider, or matter that you require the assistance with in this particular sector, given the observations that we've made on the respective oversights?
You know, I think that the issue of a center of excellence for ECD is very important. But, you know, the perception of ECD is different, for example, of somebody doing other forms of postgraduate study for reasons that is a result of the way ECD has evolved, right? But I consider it as a foundation for addressing the education challenges in South Africa. And it's quite clear that, you know, if you look at the National Qualifications Framework, And if you look at the developmental milestones of children, and obviously the qualifications in ECD are going to address that, those developmental milestones. And I think it is a critical intervention. I think the statement by Ms. Mathy that they spoke to UWC, University of Western Cape, to establish a center of excellence. I think there should be collaboration between the universities, the TVET colleges. I think the SSOs in the Western Cape that play such an important role in supporting ECD centers. I think you need a very big academic intervention, and I think there's a need for a lot of knowledge production. A knowledge production that is rooted within the lived reality of the majority of children in the Western Cape, and from there generate a narrative that informs how we engage with the ECD sector. I think that's a very big gap in the system. So those are my comments, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lucas, anything that you wish to add before I hand over to the National?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I would like to just note that within the Western Cape since 2014, right up to 2023, over 18,443 participants took part in the ECD learnerships level 4 and 5. Now, having said that, we need to move them towards a diploma or an advanced certificate. And the problem that we find on the ground is the person's matric results. We would have loved to move as many of them as we possibly can into a B.Ed or, into a very formalized degree for early childhood development, but it isn't possible. And I think that DHET must actually be part of the development of almost a bridge for our people on the ground. And I think that is an absolute need at the moment, is to get our people into the course as seamlessly as possible.
Thank you so much. DDG or Mr. Magaga or Ms. Matthys, from your side, any particular ideas that you wish for the provincial department to consider or matters to assist with regarding ECD in this particular topic?
I think, Chair, I've said some things around what it would be good for the Western Cape to do a situational analysis. I'm sure you have a lot of data, as with the DBE have it. And, universities like to work with empirical data. And I do think then that the bridge for the people on the ground sounds interesting and intriguing. I'd like to follow up on that one. And then the mention of ECD learnerships. I think we would need to interrogate that a bit further to see, well, what exactly are these learnerships, and how would that feed into whatever qualifications we have. I'm very excited to hear that there's appetite for the diploma and the bachelor as well. I think once we get to the bachelor's status, it will probably also, like Mr. Naika said, the perception of ECD needs also to be strengthened. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about, but unfortunately it slipped my mind now. Yeah, but that's basically what I wanted to say. It would be great to take this forward with you in a more structured way where we can work out what the steps are. Thank you.
Mr. Magaga?
From my side, I will say if the province can work with HEIs to determine the needs of which programs needs to be developed first in order to address what is in the Western Cape in terms of the ECD programs and qualifications. Because I think if there's that synergy, it becomes easier because as Michelle has indicated, you don't want to spend 400,000 thinking that it will yield 400,000, only that you even lose more than half of what you invested in terms of developing the program. So if the universities will know which programs needs to be developed, then they'll be encouraged to develop them because they know that this is what this is the provincial needs, and therefore we can develop those. And then at the end of the day, the university won't get frustrated and say, why must we invest if we're not so sure we are going to get students? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see Ms. Mate's hand and then Mr. Nike's hand. What is wonderful is Mr. Nike and Ms. Lucas is already used to this committee giving them lots of homework there. So I'm sure that the national department will get very used to us quickly as well for how we hand out homework. Ms. Mate.
Yes, thank you. I've also wonder whether the issue of registered centres and unregistered centres need to be addressed by the province. Let me not say I wonder if, I do think it's important to find out the status of the centres that you have where I don't know how many thousands, I think 9,020 of your practitioners are in registered centres, but 8,300 odd are in unregistered centres. So how are you going to map that and assist in getting those centres to be registered might be something you would want to put on your plan. Thank you.
No problem. We, as a committee, we have already engaged in the compliance aspect of the registered and unregistered. And from an oversight perspective, I think from a committee side that we could say that there are various reasons why people choose to be registered or not registered. And they really vary when we go on oversight and we hear what people have to say. But I know Mr. Nike can also assist in this regard. Mr. Nike?
So Neil and mentioned that the universities need to we need to find what the universities are interested in. So if we establish that and we establish a working relationship with the university, what are the next steps? Do we make contact with you, or do we or what do we do?
Is it Miss Mates for this particular one?
Michelle, you want to take it up?
Yeah.
Mr. Magaga, okay.
Okay, I think the thing is when you talk to the university, you are saying, look, there is this policy on ECD, which professionalizes our practitioners into educators. We have realized that most of our practitioners do not have even the minimum qualification, such as a higher certificate. Can you, maybe one of these universities, whether it's UWC or whatever you say to them, can you develop that? The university will then try and, it's not about us saying we have to fund them per se, but we know that they are developing, but they are not eager because they are not so sure whether there will be students coming into the system. One of the things is whether there will be funding from the province or you're going to seek funding somewhere so that when the program is developed, do you fund students or other students or already employed practitioners into this program so that they can have bursaries? So that's one of the things that we can sit down and sit around and think about it as to how do you deal with the university, because from our side, we don't have funding. I don't think, Michelle, do you think we're funding for those? I don't think so. So I think it's you, the university, influencing what they need to develop. Because, for instance, you've got a higher certificate that is being developed by UWC. But I think it's being developed, but I think it's a bit slow. But if you encourage them to start submitting for PQM, for accreditation and all that. In 2-3 years' time, that program can be offered. It's minus one problem. You've got now your practitioners getting professionalized in a way. But the issue of funding is the one that maybe can come later when you sit down and see where can we get funding for this ECD. I think there are so many institutions that are willing to fund a student who wants to register for ECD, but it's all for you to go and find out where to look for funding if you want to make it easier for the university to get encouraged to developing these programs.
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Naik, I'm going to allow you a last
Okay.
bite on this, because then I'm going to ask the committee to start giving you guys homework in this regard.
No, thank you, Chairperson. So what we are having a meeting with the with UWC, and one of the things that we have on the agenda is the issue of ECD and how you advance the ECD narrative within disadvantaged contexts
Yes.
in the Western Cape. And so that's our broad agenda, because we want to impact on the development of children, and we want to ensure or try to make it possible for that development to impact on the foundation phase, intermediate phase, and senior phase, and the throughput, because we think all the potential lies there. But that's in a very initial stage, and so I thought I'll just mention that.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mate, and then I'm going to close the session up.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for my last bite. I see Sigamini. I think you're the Sigamini that works with us on the White Paper 6.
That's right.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So I wanted to say we are both remiss. We should have made a point around special needs education in ECD centres, because if we think the quintile 1 children who are in quintile 1 contexts are really the most vulnerable, I think this level of children with special needs is even worse off, and we know how they kept out of schools, etc. So it seems to me that, from my perspective, that the province really should get together and write up something like a concept note. What are the issues? What are the strategies? And all of that before you continue, because there'll be so many things that you'll be bombarded with. But if you have a conceptual document that makes it very clear what your purpose, vision, mission is, what the challenges are, etc., who your stakeholders will be, that might be a helpful place to start. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Chairperson, can I respond to Michelle? I think Michelle's making a very important point. With your permission,
Okay.
Chair, can I speak? So, I mean, when people speak about special needs and inclusion, they often refer to disability. But Michelle is right. You know, it's a much broader concept, and it's actually, you know, I would be very reluctant to call it special need. What I would say is that, you know, there is a developmental deficit because of environmental factors in the environment, which alienates and marginalizes children. So, you know, whatever term we want to use for it, we can use the term. But the point is, with ECD in education, we now have we have a mechanism to address that developmental lag. And so Michelle, I agree with you, and I think that's going to be our agenda. And you know, Ms. Lucas has a similar opinion, and that's been our agenda. That's what we're trying to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I truly do appreciate both the National Department of Higher Education and Training, as well as the Provincial Department for Basic Education being with us today. These are all questions that the members have been faced with on oversight. There are often questions that we do not necessarily have the answers to because, you know, in the province, we only have particular mandates, and then we have to ask for assistance from the national department in this regard for the information. And we appreciate you bringing this information to us, but also for us to be able to have this conversation as to how do we work together in order to assist the particular sector. And I think on behalf of the members, we appreciate you being here with us. With that, you may be excused to go ahead with your day-to-day matters. And I just ask that the members just remain behind so that we are able to just deal with some resolutions and committee administration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chair. And thank you, colleagues in the Western Cape. And good luck. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, colleagues. Bye.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, with that, before I move on to our committee administration, if we could just quickly deal with resolutions. I know a few have been proposed already. Ms. Hassan Musa, I'm not sure if you have jotted down some of them. Otherwise, I could start with just mentioning some.
Chair, it's been all over the place. If you could mention some of it, I would also go back on the recordings to make sure what I've captured is within the request of the committee.
No problem. So one of the matters that were mentioned were that perhaps the Western Cape Department of Education could use its empirical data to engage with the higher education institutions in the Western Cape. UWC specifically was mentioned regarding not necessarily expediting, but seeing how we can bring the ECD qualification to come to a conclusion in terms of its accreditation, essentially, for lack of a better wording. I'm sure that you'll be able to use your, you know, your higher grade English to assist me in this regard. Okay.
Will do, Chair.
Okay. Then, what was the other one here that I wrote down? Okay, so the other one that is similar to that is that it was mentioned that UWC is trying to establish a center for excellence in this regard regarding ECD and having programs offered to practitioners. Perhaps in this regard, we may want to ask the respective higher education institutions in the Western Cape, perhaps particularly UWC and CPUT, because those two are mentioned as already starting with the request for accreditation as to their progress in this regard and their vision perhaps in this regard. Ms. Hassan Musa?
Yes, Chair, got that.
Okay, no problem. And then the other question I have, and it stems from this particular presentation, is, you know, we want our
Sorry,
respective...
Chairperson. Sorry, my sincere
yes?
apologies. I just wonder, must we stay in the meeting? I'm not too sure.
No, I've excused you to
Okay,
go about
thank
your
you,
day-to-day matters.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, my apologies.
No problem, no problem. Okay, the other question I had, which stems from this presentation, but it would probably be to the National Department of Education, is now that we want the practitioners to have these higher qualifications that were referred to. One of the things is, you know, universities are concerned with the intake they would get and the demand for the particular qualification. So one of the things that DBE has been speaking about is the possibility of ECD becoming compulsory in the future. And my question in this regard would be is, has that been costed? What is the demand per province, particularly the Western Cape, and whether they have costed the possibility of ECD being compulsory, and if so, if they could share such information with us. Perhaps with your higher grade English, you'd be able to assist me in putting that nicely.
Will do, Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues, are there any other questions or possible resolutions? If none, then Ms. Hassan Musa, let me just check quickly, are there any documents that we need to consider today other than our briefing?
No, Chair, it's put on the agenda for next week to consider for the 19th, next week's meeting, if I've got that correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The 19th, sorry, Chair, the 19th of September, we're considering the last two committee meetings with those minutes, half minutes.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. Ms. Hassan Musa has sent out the respective notice for meetings, if I'm correct, for next week, the 19th. Let me just have a look here. Not yet. I think the notice has gone out, but not the meeting slot request.
That's
Ms. Hassan
correct, Chair.
Musa? Okay, that's correct. So just to remind everyone, the 19th, we do have a meeting. It does start at 1 o'clock. And I would just like to remind everyone that to have reliable internet connection at the start of 1 o'clock next week, as I know that some members will be traveling before that meeting. But with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much, and have a lovely afternoon further.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
Chair.
members.